This program is brought to you by thepodcastfactory.com.
How would you like to get more customers, make more profits, and have bigger breakthroughs? Get Doberman Dan's profit-boosting breakthroughs. Normally, this would cost you $98 per month, but right now, for listening to this show, he's giving you a free copy of his Doberman Dan letter. All you have to do is go to DobermanDan.com and sign up to get your free copy now.
Prepare yourself for the uncensored, nothing held back, no BS reality of how business and life really work. Doberman Dan is off the chain.
Hey, Jonathan, guess what I did at lunch?
You took a nap.
I did not. At lunch, I cut the cheese.
Oh, good. What kind of cheese was it?
So it was mozzarella, and the Colombiana serves me this gluten-free tortilla with eggs and goat cheese, and then I had a little side of mozzarella, and so this is just further proof that guys never mentally mature past age 14. So I cut my little piece of mozzarella, and I tell her, "Hey, I just cut the cheese," and I laugh, and she looks at me like I don't get it. So I translated it into Spanish, and told her, apenas corté el queso.
Oh, boy.
And it still didn't register. Like, I had to explain it. See, that's a saying in English. Cut the cheese means...
If you got to explain it, it ain't funny, Dan.
Exactly. It's just, I found it amusing. This has no connection whatsoever with our topic today. We're talking with Dr. Glenn Livingston.
What?
Yes, who needs no introduction because he's just completely, utterly brilliant. And I love him to death. Thanks for doing this, Glenn.
You're very welcome. And if you're explaining your fart jokes in Spanish to your wife, you've been married too long.
Whoa.
There are days where I would not argue with that.
Hope she doesn't listen.
Yeah, well, I hope not. Normally not. And if we talk real fast in English, maybe she won't get, she'll only get half of it.
Okay.
So
I'm here, baby. Let's do this thing.
Let's do this thing. I just want to take the governor off of you and let you talk about whatever you want to talk about. Because yes, my opinion is biased because you are my friend and I love you. But even if you weren't my friend, I recognize your brilliance. You're truly brilliant. You don't have to say anything about this. I'm sure you have a genius IQ. And if you do, I've never heard you talk about it. Like, you don't brag about those things, but I'm sure you do. And geez, man, I just love you. Every time I spend time with you, I feel better. On our mastermind meetings, we have our own little personal mastermind. You, me, Terry Dean, and another gentleman who prefers to remain anonymous, who's a great entrepreneur and great marketer.
You can say my name.
So I always come away with that feeling better and with lots of marketing ideas. So I just wanted to share you with my world, with my canine crew, as we call them.
Well, thanks. And, for the first time ever, I want to say that I'm really, 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 really smart, and all you guys are really, 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 really stupid. I just had to say that at least one time.
You just voiced how I feel at times.
IQ is actually, it's the upper range of the IQ tests are not nearly as accurate as the middle ranges. And so when you go, a standard deviation or two above the norm, it really doesn't matter that much. Measuring genius is a whole other specialty, and it's not really as evolved because there aren't as many people to measure, So at least that's the way that it was 25, 30 years ago when I was studying all that stuff. But you know what? I'm smart enough to do what I want in the world, and I think most of the people listening here are also. And the other thing about intelligence is that it's not a unitary ability. Everybody tends to think, either you're smart or you're not smart, or you've got an IQ of 130. That's 2 standard deviations above the norm. You're so much smarter than everybody else. But when you actually look at IQ test, there's a constellation of abilities, and nobody's high on all of them, or hardly anybody's high on all of them. So, for example, I'm really high on vocabulary and logical reasoning, but I'm very bad at visual spatial reasoning. So I'm totally retarded moving furniture. I need to have someone in the house who can see how the furniture is going to rotate, because I'll sit in the freaking, living room all day long trying to rotate the desk to get it out of the door, and it just doesn't go. So, and retarded is a bad word.
I can so totally relate to that. Yeah, it's just a visual thing, visualizing certain things and how they fit, right?
And rotating it in space and visualizing how it has to move to get someplace else. It's the kind of thing you might do with a jigsaw puzzle, but it's more in three-dimensional space that I have the trouble. So, you learn to compensate. I pay people to move furniture for me. It works better.
That's an easy workaround.
Yeah.
I've been curious for years to take an IQ test, but also afraid to, because my biggest fear is that it's going to come back that like I'm a dunce. If that's the case, I really don't want to know that, because like what you just said, you're smart enough to do things you want to do. I have figured out how to do the things I want to do, and whether or not, that relates to any IQ level. I mean, knowing my IQ level isn't going to help me in any way, I don't think.
Right. The other way that it can help is if you make an assessment and you really know where your strengths are and you learn how to leverage that. That can help. And then sometimes when when one of the abilities is really out of whack with the others, like, if you're a couple of standard deviations above the norm for, vocabulary and logical reasoning, but then you're, either average or below the norm for visual spatial reasoning, sometimes you can look at the person's history and say, well, there might have been something in their development because it shouldn't be so far below everything else. So sometimes the disparity between the different types of intelligence can tell you something. But largely speaking, I'm actually a little embarrassed at the focus on all of the testing in the psychological community. I felt like when I first started studying it, it was really important, and I actually taught it. I was actually so good at it, they actually asked me to teach it to the graduate students when I was in graduate school. But then as I went along and I had more clinical experience actually interviewing people, I just felt like we shouldn't have to have those tests. We did, can't you just figure it out by talking to people? And I know there are going to be a bunch of psychologists that jump on and saying that I'm trashing the standards of care in the profession and I'm going against the ethics of the community. But I'm a little embarrassed that there's so much reliance on tests as opposed to good old human interaction and acumen and a perspicacious judgment of character. I don't really think that we need to go into the level of detail that we do with these tests. It's personal opinion.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Does it really accurately convey everything you're looking for?
Yeah, but I mean, all that having been said, I am really, really, really smart, and you guys are really, really, really smart.
That's going to be the theme for today.
That's the theme today.
I'm going to need you to repeat that often.
Okay, I will.
To remind everybody. So I'm a horrible interviewer. I just jumped into this thing and we just started talking. So for those who don't know you have a really interesting background. Would you mind taking us through that story and how you wound up a psychologist with all your experience, how you wound up in online marketing?
Well, I was born as a poor African-American child.
Yes. Yes. I know that. I've seen pictures. Yes.
I was born to. You do something to me, man. This is not really me. This is I'm really more professional.
I'm a bad influence.
Yeah, you're turning me into this rebellious, wisecracking a-hole. Okay, so I was born to a family of psychologists and psychotherapists and counselors, and there were probably 17 of us in the expanded family. So not just my mom and my dad and my sister, but my cousins, my aunts and my uncles, and my grandparents and my great uncles, and pretty much everybody in the family was in the family business. Not all referring to one another, but they all became counselors. Started with my dad, kind of introduced the family to it in the 50s, and then they just kept on pulling in one person after the other. All I ever wanted to do was be a psychologist. That's all I ever wanted to do. Like, some people agonize about what they're going to do, but I wanted to be a psychologist. And as I was turning 16, all of my friends were looking forward to getting a car. But my dad said, if you want to, when you're 16, I could pay for a car or I could pay for a shrink. And I said, definitely a shrink. I need to see a shrink.
You opted for the shrink, huh?
I opted for the shrink. I'm exaggerating, but my dad told me, and I think he was right, that if you wanted to work things out in your life, you should get into therapy. And if you really wanted to work things out, you should become a therapist. And I just pursued that wholeheartedly, went straight through college to graduate school, had my bouts with drugs and girls and stuff like that, but basically went straight through college to graduate school. and got my degree, became a child and family psychologist, built a very large practice fairly quickly. But along the way, I married a marketer. I'm divorced now, so I'm not going to say as many nice things about her as I used to. but I married a marketer, and she taught me an awful lot. And the debt of thanks that I really owe to her was that everybody else in my family is a country doctor, more or less. They have a small practice. They affect maybe 1,000 people over the course of a lifetime, working with 40 or 50 people at a time. And it's a good life. There's no knocking that. And there's a lot of place in the world for country doctors, but I wanted to affect the world in a larger capacity. And so I was really taken with Sharon and her knowledge of marketing and how she could conceivably help me to get into psychoeducation, to, develop books and tapes and software programs that could affect the masses and educate the masses about the things that I learned, which were so valuable in psychology. And so I had a lot of entrepreneurial failures along those directions. I tried all sorts of different things. I developed software that analyzed people's dreams, and I did all kinds of stuff in weight loss way back when that failed. And then I eventually
were those info products in the weight loss niche?
Yeah, I had a book. I was going to do these groups. My original book was called Eat With Your Head. The idea being that everybody was just indulging with food and they really needed to make more logical choices. And I didn't do any research about it. And what I didn't realize was that people don't want to eat with their head. What they want to do is eat the cake and take a pill and wake up skinny.
That's right. That's what we all want.
And the hardest thing for helping professionals to learn marketing. Because what helping professionals don't understand is that the cure, which always requires work, any type of long-term cure, there are very few pills out there that will solve anything, right? Any type of long-term cure requires dedication, a change of lifestyle. And in psychology, it requires the development of frustration tolerance and object constancy and communication skills and relationship skills. But they'll come in, they'll say, I want stress management tools. Can you make all the stress go away tomorrow? And helping professionals who've become adept at taking the presentation of symptoms and digging down for what's underneath the symptoms and looking at the broader set of problems that need to be fixed to adapt the person's lifestyle over the course of time with some type of in-depth work, they can't wrap their head around the fact that you can't get people's attention with the cure. You can't get people's attention with the methodology involved in the cure.
That's right, because that's work, man. Nobody wants to work.
Nobody wants to work, but the average psychologist's life, for example, is sitting in a room with people, training all of their thoughts and feelings to help the patient to be willing to go beyond the symptom and look into the deeper work that needs to be done. That's, for the first 25 years of my life until I got my doctorate, and then probably the next 10 after that, seeing patients and taking graduate, postgraduate courses and stuff. That was the bulk of my life and my focus was how do you get people to go beyond the symptom into what's really necessary for the cure? And in marketing, you don't want to go beyond the symptom to get people's attention. You want to make the biggest, boldest claim you can and guarantee it to the, I have this one business coaching student who came up with the best guarantee I ever heard. He says, if this product doesn't do exactly what I say, you can roundhouse kick me in the balls.
I'm going to totally swipe that.
I can't remember his name. I want to give him credit. Oh, whoever your name is, you should put a post on this podcast and we'll make sure you get credit for it.
Can you imagine using that for marketing? Like marketing some sort of therapy or something like if this therapy doesn't help you, you can roundhouse kick me in the balls.
Right. If after 6 weeks of cognitive behavioral therapy, you are not infinitely less depressed and more confident in your ability to purge your mind of negative thinking, I'll show up at your house and you can roundhouse kick me in the balls.
And there are certain patients who would think, Dr. Glenn is brilliant. That is part of the therapy. The kicking in the balls is the releasing the rage and anger I've held for years.
That's too much. But see, that's the thing is that, we're exaggerating, but not by much. Not by much, right? You can't just advertise, experience with depression, cognitive behavioral therapy, insurance accepted, come for 12 sessions and I'll make you better. You can't just do that.
If you're super, super lucky, you might attract one person who, for the past year and a half has been investigating cognitive behavioral therapy on their own, and you just lucked out and they saw your ad. But of course, that's like, what, a 1 in 100,000 chance.
Right. And what you need to really present is the best case scenario with a strong guarantee and proof of your ability to deliver. Now, there are all types of ethical reasons you can't do that for psychotherapy necessarily. But when you're starting to market coaching, you're starting to market, products and services that have any type of helping human services effect, you really do need that. And so, guys, are you in front of your computer? You want to go to what's my headline on? If you go to neverbingeagaincoaching.com, you want to read the headline I have there?
Yeah.
This is where I'm helping people to lose weight.
This is a fairly new, Never Binge
Again coaching.com.
This is a fairly new venture, right?
Yes, it's working well. I'm not supposed to say how well it's working, but it's working pretty well.
It's working well, but we're not allowed to review how well it's working. We're not allowed to say it's kicking ass.
Well, it's not kicking ass. It's working good enough. But I just want to compare and contrast what I do now versus what I did like 20 years ago. I said, eat with your head. That was the goal.
Mm-hmm. That creates a funny word picture in my mind.
Yeah, no, and there was a nice picture of a lady with an apple on her head looking up on it with a smile. We had a nice cover of the book.
So it's cute. I mean, it's clever. It's cute, but cute and clever ain't what we need.
Right. The name of my book now is Never Binge Again. That's what people want. They want to be able to never overeat again.
So you want us to read this headline here?
Yeah.
Why continue to struggle alone when I can help you one-on-one to defeat your worst cravings, lose weight, and stick to the food plan of your choice?
Right.
Doesn't that just sum up every single thing that people in this market want?
Yes, that's exactly what it is. And most helping professionals can't get their head around that. So I almost cringe if I'm at a family party or something and some psychologist says, how do I market my practice? And I almost want to say, just go get a job, man. Just go get a job at a counseling center. Because it's going to take you 10 years to unlearn. There's nothing wrong with the focus you've learned, and that's what's necessary to actually cure people. But learning marketing is going to require the same level of study that you did through graduate school in order to get your head around how to make the claims and protect yourself and make the guarantees and make the sale. It's going to require the same level of study, and it's not going to make sense to you. And you're going to write 15 sales letters that don't work, and you're going to come complain to me and either just go hire a copywriter or go get a job.
Mm-hmm. Unless you're just a masochist and you want to go through that 10-year learning curve that totally can suck the life out of you.
Yeah. Or else just let me roundhouse kick you in the balls right now, because that's what your life is going to be like.
This is just a taste of what the next 10 years are going to be like for you, buddy. So how did you arrive at this point? You're not practicing currently and have not been practicing for a while.
Well, I mean, I kind of am now. I don't advertise as a psychologist anymore. I'm not looking for psychotherapy patients anymore for a very long time. The biggest thing that I do now is run the Never Binge Again coaching program. And actually, at the moment, I've got 100 coaching clients personally that I'm taking through that, because I'm really just at the tail end of making sure that we've got a system that works and kind of documenting it and figuring out how to train other coaches so I can start to scale the business. So I'm doing that. I enjoy that. I really do enjoy. I was a binge eater. I had serious problems with food. I could dislodge my jaw and empty the delicatessen.
But as thin as you are, and ever since I've known you, I've never really seen you healthy. That's hard for me to imagine that you were a binge eater.
You never saw me healthy?
No. I'm sorry. I never saw you heavy. Excuse me.
Oh, well, I mean, I'm 6'4". I've always liked to work out. I'm muscular, reasonably muscular, ladies.
And available, ladies.
And available. No, I'm reasonably muscular, and I burned a lot of calories. So I would, in the early days, I would work out for 2 or 3 hours a day, and I could eat 7,000 calories a day, no problem.
Was the working out a way to basically give yourself permission to binge eat?
It's called exercise bulimia. It's like I couldn't stick my finger down my throat to purge, but it's actually a type of purging.
Oh,
and I didn't know that back then, and I don't think they were making the diagnosis back then. But yes, I was an exercise bulimic.
I've never heard that term, but I've seen it done. I know people who've done that. They're exercise fanatics just as a way to justify all the crap they want to eat.
Yeah. Yeah, they work out to eat. And that was me. But when I got older, I didn't have the time to do that anymore. And so I did get fat. I was about, I'm right around 205 now. I should be down to 200. I got to go back down there. But I was around 260 at my height. So I was never super duper obese. But that was more than 20% above where I should be. So I technically was obese. The bigger problem, there were two big problems. One was my triglyceride levels were through the roof. And since every male in my family has had a heart attack in their 40s and 50s, the doctors were telling me that I was going to be the new record young person to have one. And
ooh, I'm going to break a record.
Woo-woo. Right? Said to the doctor, if that doesn't happen, can I roundhouse kick you in the balls? But, how many times is too many times to call back a joke in an hour? I never really studied.
For me, none. We haven't even approached the limit, and we certainly. And actually, you're really behind on reminding people how smart you are and how stupid they are. So we got to do that more.
I'm looking for the opportunity.
Yeah. Okay.
We got some show titles here.
Yeah, I'm trying to help your copywriting efforts. That's entirely how I arranged mine. So my triglycerides, I think at the highest were about 1,100. I actually have a copy of a test that said 830 something. So there was a serious scare there. And I'm kidding around a lot now, but it really does mean a lot to me to be a psychologist. And I was working with suicidal people, a lot of them. Never lost anybody, but I lost a lot of sleep. And I was working with couples after an affair and their marriage was at stake. And I had a very high stress job where it was very important for me to be psychologically present. And I wasn't, or at least not all the time. I would be sitting there thinking, when can I go get a whole pizza? I wonder how late Starbucks is open. And the food thoughts were driving me out of my mind. And ask anybody who's really suffered with binge eating, drives you out of your mind. It almost takes away your life. And so as I got older and fatter and older and fatter, I went through all of the traditional routes to try to find a solution. Went to Overeaters Anonymous. I went to see psychologists and psychiatrists myself, tried taking medication. And I even funded a very large study to look at the relationship between overeating particular foods and personality and life experience. And for example, I figured out that people who had trouble overeating on chocolate tended to have loneliness and heartbreak in their life. And so I thought, now all I need to do is figure out where's the loneliness and heartbreak and how do I solve that? And I went back and I talked to my mom, and she told me that when I was a little boy, when I was a toddler, my dad was in the army. She was terrified he was going to be sent to Vietnam. He was a captain. Her father, my grandfather, had been in jail and she didn't know where he was. And so she was very depressed and very overwhelmed. And she couldn't always give me the hugs and the holding that I needed when I would come to crying to her. And so what she did was she put a little bottle of chocolate syrup. It was called Bosco back then. This was the 1960s. It was called Bosco. And she put it in a little refrigerator on the floor. And she'd say, go get your Bosco, Glenn. And I'd go crawl over to the refrigerator and I'd sit and I'd suck on the chocolate syrup bottle. And she said, of course you go to chocolate when you feel lonely. And I figured then, okay. So I gave my mom a hug and I talked to her and we kind of healed that rift. And I felt better inside. But there was still this crazy little voice that said, you know what, Glenn? See, you're right. Your mama didn't love you enough and your papa didn't love you enough either. And you've got all these holes of loneliness inside of you. And until you figure out how to fill those completely, you're just going to have to keep on binging on chocolate.
So this was like, I don't know, for lack of a better word, this was programming at a really young age that was just like, boom, part of the operating system. Lonely, chocolate.
Yeah. And most people have that. But the thing is that knowing that doesn't cure it.
Look, I know you are digging this interview with the super smart Dr. Glenn Livingston, but we got to keep this thing on time. So we're going to bring you back to part 2 next week. So remember to tune in next week to get part 2 of the interview with Dr. Glenn Livingston. Thank you for tuning into the Off the Chain Show. Thanks for listening. And remember, if you want to create rivers of revenue from your existing customers, then the next thing you need to do is go to DobermanDan.com. He's given away a free copy of his $98 per month Doberman Dan letter just for listening to the show. Go to DobermanDan.com now and sign up for your free issue.
This is the podcastfactory.com.